It's time for In Bed with Jed.
Do you think that the legacy of, like, let's say for example, like Harvey Korman has been like lessened with the younger generation, or a lot of like his peers like that were also like and we got to remember too, which I did not know, I did my research as well, that your dad was not just a performer. He had he had 103 credits as an actor, but also you got to love IMDb, 7 credits as director and 3 credits as a producer. And so he wasn't just, he was also like contributing behind the scenes as well.
Yes.
But do you feel, so I think that with your, to backtrack, I feel that with your page, you're really keeping that era of entertainment, which is, let's face it, it is part of American history. Pop culture is part of American history. You're really keeping that alive. So that's another thing that you could add in addition to being a father and a husband and a writer.
Well,
and
I appreciate that, Jed. That's very kind of you. Said I never thought of it until you said that. Yes, I guess I am a pop culture celebrator, or a celebrator of pop culture, which I am. I think that the fact that MeTV has Burnett Show on every day, Flintstones is on. My dad was the voice of the Great Gazoo.
Yes,
did you know that?
He was. Oh yes, and he was also the voice. Right. He was, of course, and he was also the voice of the. As you said, we only had 4 channels growing up, so we pretty much watched whatever was on TV. We didn't have 300 channels, but he was also the voice of the Dictabird in the movie too.
Yes, and he played Wilma's father in the second one.
Oh wow! Okay, and he was. Know.
And he was the voice in the original James Bond spoof, The Man Called Flintstone. He did 3 voices in that. So, really, Jed, you think about it, MeTV has Mama's Family on, which he co-directed the first 2 seasons, The Burnett Show, Flintstone. So on any given night, you could watch MeTV and you could get an explosion of Harvey Korman. Maybe I shouldn't use the word explosion with an old man. Let's just say any given night, people have said to me on MeTV, I saw your father 4 times in one night. I'm like, I saw him on Munsters. I saw him on Gidget. I saw him on Burnett. I saw him on the Flintstones. But as you said, you have to remember, it depends on what city you lived in. In the 70s, you had ABC, CBS, NBC, and then you had, of course, PBS. So you had four channels, maybe. But you always made the rounds. And my dad made the rounds when he came out in '60. So he did Route 66. He did Skelton. He did Lucy. He did the shows you had to do to get recognized. So he did corner a market, a niche, doing character work. He'd always wanted to be, he was hailed as the next Laurence Olivier by Bette Davis and Charles Laughton after a play in Santa Monica in the 50s. He did Othello. And Bette Davis and Charles Laughton, for people who don't know, those are 2 of the biggest names in acting, came backstage and said, "You're going to be the next Laurence Olivier." And I thought, well, this is 57 or 58. My dad said, "I'm going to go to Hollywood. I'm going to be the next Olivier." And he said, all I could offer was an aging, balding Jew. Because back then it was like, not everybody could be Gregory Peck. Not everybody could be those big actors. So you had to create a niche. And he said, well, I'll do character work. And I think the only thing he resented in his life, Jed, was that he was not given the opportunity, like a lot of actors, to show that he could do more than what he did. And you got typecast, and you become a victim of your own success. And like John Ritter, you know him through his company. You think of Larry Hagman, you think of Dallas or I Dream of Jeannie. You become a victim of your own success. And then what do? Is you spend the whole rest of your life going, oh, I can do more. But the casting people and the producers don't see that. They see what you'd already done, your bread and butter. And then people get, I said, but that's limiting. You're impeding the ability for an artist to grow, to evolve artistically, creatively, and financially. So as I tell people, the only reason labels are good are for utensils in the kitchen and sock drawers. Other than that, labels are self-destructive and they impede human development and growth in all of us. That's why I hate labels. That's why when people say, "Oh, you're learning disabled," oh, what's the fixation on the word disabled? I'm not unable. I just learn differently because clinically speaking, my disability is nothing more than the delay in the learning process. I retain information slower. That doesn't mean I can't learn. I just learn slower. So yeah. I've really tried to get away from saying disabled. I try to say I have a specific learning style because that's what it is.
It's kind of like the way I try and explain it to people is, okay, it's not always sometimes the information. You get the information, but sometimes it's the way the information is presented. So
exactly.
Right, that makes all the difference.
It does, because maybe you're a better audio learner than a reader. Some people are better. People can read and comprehend better if they're reading it than when they're hearing it. It differs for different people. So, so I've had to learn how to compensate. And one of the things that really was amazing was, and I didn't realize this until now, is that when you did theater, it forced me to retain information and purge myself of new information and gain new ones. Because if you did a play, and you know this better than anyone, if you're doing a play, the director says, okay, you have to be off book in 2 weeks. And it's people who don't know that reference, you have to be off script in 2 weeks. And I said, look, we're doing junior high theater here. This is not the Royal Shakespearean Company of Iowa. And you're not George Abbott. So chill. So, but my dad said, if you're going to do something that you love, which is theater, as a hobby, as a chore, at the same time, you're using those skills that you don't normally have or are not as refined. So if you love what you do, it's not really a chore to challenge yourself to retain information, because you force yourself to do something that if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to learn faster. But if you're doing theater and you love it, you're more intent. Your intent is, oh, I'm enjoying this process. I love acting, because you get out of yourself by playing a character that is so different, and you lose yourself in that character. That's why people say, what is that Mother Marcus Jewish character on the Burnett show? I said, that's basically all his Jewish grandparents. That's his mother. It's in many ways, in some strange way, my dad doing those characters was almost like a cathartic purge. He got to work out a lot of stuff about his family and his mother or whatever, and he got to play these roles and inhabit people that he loved. And it was his way of saying, I love you. And it was his way of saying, I'm celebrating you. So I found theater to be a very cathartic thing for me, because I had to learn 180 pages in 2 weeks. And learning doesn't come easy to me. So, and also the acting part, Jed also addressed the speech pathology part of it, because I had to learn about diction and being coherent and being more polished when I spoke out in public. So all those both those words melded together, and not realizing they were melding together. But my father never said, do it because I'm going to put an educational label on it, say, do it because you love it. And then in the process of learning lines, my confidence in who I became grew. And so my dad was ahead of his time in how he used these tools to help me develop, and not realizing that's what he was doing the whole time. Because he never said, don't go into it for the fame, because he never did. He never pushed the fame part, because he didn't go into acting because he was wanted to be famous. He did it because he wanted to earn a living. The fame, the wealth, and the fame is an afterthought if you think about it.
Yeah, and you said that like even him, who was who is a pop culture figure and a household name, he he had his insecurities as well, and I have to admit I was a little bit surprised, when I read about how he was intimidated by Robin Williams, and he was starstruck by Burt Lancaster, and it's hard to imagine how somebody who's so again so omnipresent,
Right.
would feel that way, but it just goes to show, that we're all, no matter how skilled you may be, no matter how successful you may, maybe, no matter how wealthy you may be, we're all human just like that. We all still have our insecurities. They never really go away. Sometimes they
no, and sometimes, I mean, I'm sure everybody knows the pecking order of show business: theater, movies, television, and then there's everything else. So if you're going to talk about the legitimacy of acting, my dad's whole attitude was, oh, Burt Lancaster and Anthony Hopkins, all these people, these movie gods to him. And he just said, oh, I'm just a schmo from this variety show on Saturday night. He never put a value, a self-worth to his work, because he never thought that getting a pie in the face had any intrinsic value down the road. He didn't realize when the Burnett Show was on, Johnny Carson was on, the country was coming out of Vietnam. It was coming out of Watergate. So I said, Dad, you have to realize the Burnett Show and the Carson Show was a beacon of light to many people. But he could never measure that as being equal to a scientist or a doctor or a fireman or somebody who puts their life on the line every day. So when we had breakfast with Burt Lancaster, when he meets Anthony Hopkins for lunch at a restaurant, it's surreal that these people know who he is. And I can tell you the story very, very briefly. Joanne Woodward, who's married to Paul Newman, did an episode where she played Eunice's best friend in a Mama sketch. All right,
Yes.
Paul Newman is in the booth with the producers, the cameraman, doing camera 1, camera 2. Now remember, they did 2 shows a night with the Burnett Show. Paul Newman is sweating profusely. He said, I don't know how you people do this every night. He said, well, we do 2 shows, Paul. You do this twice a night? I said, we have cuts. We have, we do have cue cards, but they don't try not to use cue cards because you can tell when an actor's looking at a cue card. It's too obvious. I said, we do cuts in between 2 shows. So my wife has to do this again? And she's loving it. Joanne is loving it because she loved working with Carol, my dad, and Vicky. But Paul is sweating profusely, and he's like, I'm not even in the sketch, and I fear for my wife. And Paul Newman, all these people are looking at Paul Newman going, yeah, but you're Paul Newman. You can do everything. That's a fallacy. We assume everybody can do everything else. But what comes down to it is, Paul, that's why you see a lot of actors who never did the Tonight Show. Cary Grant never did the Tonight Show. It's because you break that fourth wall of what we view those people to be and who they really are 2 different things. They're 2 different commodities. And a lot of actors don't want to mix those 2 worlds, because if they go on the Tonight Show and look like a complete idiot, then the studio goes, next time, shut up. Don't help your brand. Let us help you with your brand. Just keep your mouth shut. So that's why you didn't see a lot of actors on the Tonight Show, because they wanted to keep that level of wow and mystery about them as artists compared to who they were on screen. And so it's just so weird. So when my dad met Paul Newman and he met all these people, like Laurence Olivier came back afterwards, and my dad could not believe he was meeting his idol. And Laurence Olivier is saying, Harvey, I love what you do. And my dad said, you're Laurence Olivier. You can't possibly love what I do. It doesn't hold the same level of criteria or credibility. Sketch comedy, Shakespeare, not the same. And Lawrence said, yeah, but Chris, a lot of actors couldn't do what you do. So there's the other side. Could De Niro and Pacino do sketch comedy like my father? But my father could have done dramatic roles like them. There's the difference. So even though he was never given the opportunity to do dramatic roles, except maybe when he played Bud Abbott in a TV movie about Lou Costello and Bud Abbott, which was basically a hack job. But
haven't seen that.
it was a hack job. Eddie Sherman, who was the comedy team's manager, decided to use this as a platform to get back at his ex clients by saying a lot of untrue things in the movie that were not accurate. So, anyways, but I don't. I'm not going to go on a tirade about that, but I think that's one of the major resentments I think my father had, Jed, that he never got to prove that he could do more dramatic work, because he could have been the next Olivier if he had wanted to, but the casting people in LA didn't see that. They saw a character actor, and I know that Lucille Ball was very loyal to my father. She used him like at least 4 times. And she actually told Carol before the Burnett show, said, look, if you don't use Harvey, I'll use Harvey, because he's one of the best in the business. And to have the Queen of Comedy tell the other Queen of Comedy, if you don't use this guy, I will, was so flattering to my father. I mean, to get that credibility from Lucy is like, but I think the greatest moment of his life, when he went to the Hall of Fame in 2002 with Tim and Gene Stapleton and John Frankenheimer and Bob Mackie, he said, I can't believe I'm going to the Hall of Fame with all my idols. And I said to him, Dad, I always knew you would get into an institution. I just assumed it was going to be Bellevue or a downstate prison. He said, yeah, me too. But, you take what you can get, Chris. So,
wow. So now you also mentioned that it was pretty exhausting too. Like, and I think that scenario was really, what you just described about how tiring TV can be and the daily grind. Oh, you mean we have to do it again? We have another take, so we have to come back at 5 a.m. and do this all over again. And you did mention that after 10 years of doing regular TV, he was kind of burned out and all that. And a little fact that I didn't know, that he had been offered the role of on the Love Boat of Captain Stubing, and
most people don't know that, Jed.
Yeah,
to tell you the truth, most people don't know that until I tell people. If you go on the Television Academy Hall of Fame website, there's an interview with all the Hall of Fame members, and one of the things that the interview asked him, it's like, when you left Burnett's show, you had done the Love Boat movie, but in between doing the Love Boat movie and doing your own sitcom, he went in with Doug Kramer and Aaron Spelling to read, I guess, for the Meryl Stubing role. And most people don't know that my dad was offered that before Gavin McLeod was. So he could have gotten another 7 years or 9 years. But here's the irony of that. Love Boat is the show that knocked the Carol Burnett show off the air. So my dad had been on the show that knocked off the air that made him famous. So there's the irony. But you have to remember, my dad was coming off 4 years off of Danny Kaye. He came out, my dad had 14 years of steady work. How many people can say they had 14 years of steady work? Between Danny Kaye and the Carol Burnett show, my dad had a steady work of 14 years worth of work. He said, look, he and my mother were getting divorced. He wanted to spend more time with my sister Marie and I, and do some traveling and go to ball games. He said, I need to shake my Etch-a-Sketch a little bit. I need to purge myself a little bit of the 5 o'clock in the morning calls. I need to be a parent just to Chris. I need to be a parent to Maria. I need to be social. I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock every morning for a shoot. And he had that luxury. He wanted to be able to play, and he should have had that luck, the right to play on his terms. So yeah, people think the grind. Yeah, it is awful, but you have to remember, back then, the school year was like a TV year. You started in September, and you went to May, then you had 3 months off, then you started again. So his acting career on the Burnett show was 10 years of that, and my school year parallel to that. So when he got off, I was off. So it was holiday seasons for us, and traveling and vacation. And occasionally he did a movie. In '74, he did Huckleberry Finn. But he really, really tried, Jed, to really keep the summers open for us, which was great. So. So, all right. So you asked me the Love Boat reference story and then I'll add to it
Okay.
with my story. So,
Well, like I said, I didn't know. I really had no idea that the Love Boat, knocked the Carol Burnett show off the top spot. But I really think it has to do with like all those bikinis and somewhere between a speed. Yeah.
Well, you have to remember, Carol Burnett. That could have been the reason. I hate to say it, but I'd much rather look at Heather Locklear in a bathing suit than Tim with a bad toupee. But you have to remember, the Burnett show was coming at the end of its run. Dick Van Dyke had replaced my father for a few months, and that didn't work because they just gave Dick recycled material that they had given my father. And Love Boat was this, cruise line on the water, and it was this fantasy show, and that that got some legs going. Literally and figuratively had some legs.
Exactly. Yes.
And Dad had left the Burnett show, and he tried his show, and that didn't work. And my dad found out really quickly, like McLean Stevenson, like Tim Conway, a lot of the people who are second bananas. You're not a star. You're not Carol Burnett. You're not Lucy. You don't have that it factor, that X factor. So he said, so he did a lot of Love Boats. He did like at least 6 Love Boats in his lifetime. And you got a free trip out of it to Turkey or Israel, or, they went on so many different trips. So he didn't mind doing that. But he did do an episode of Love Boat with Sandy Dennis, who was the wife of George Siegel and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Yes.
So my dad would have multiple different variations of the same toupee, and he would name them Skippy Senior, Skippy Junior. So I'm in the makeup room one day. He has his makeup, his toupee, the different pieces on the styrofoam heads with a box that says Harvey Korman toupee, Skippy Senior, Skippy Junior. Somehow the toupee had slipped off the styrofoam thing and landed on the floor, and the woman who's cleaning up the makeup room thought it was a rat and tried to kill it.
Ooh.
So now I'm trying not to laugh hysterically because this woman is trying to kill a toupee that's already been dead, and she's whacking it. Now Bernie walks into the dressing room, to the makeup room, saying, "Have you seen Harvey?" I said, "No, Bernie, I haven't seen. He's maybe getting out of his wardrobe." Now my father is walking towards the makeup room thinking, "Oh God, this doesn't bode well for this lady, I can tell you that." And Bernie's trying not to laugh. I'm trying not to laugh. It's like, "Chris, sorry, where's my toupee?" "Well, Dad, the custodial woman tried to kill it with a broom. She thought it was a rat." And the woman is now looking mortified. Bernie's still trying not to laugh. I'm trying not to laugh. It's like, "Well, where is it?" "It's still on the floor." "Well, why didn't you pick it up?" I said, "I'm not touching that thing. It might come alive again, and I don't want to touch it." It's like, pick it out, clean it out. I am really surprised. He could have gotten that woman fired, but he was somewhat amused by the whole thing. I said, "I'll just have to have it rewoven." I said, "Yeah, you think?" Because it's got particles on it. It was just trying to keep a straight face in the car on the way home, because from the studio where they did Love Boat to my house is about a 15-20 minute drive. So I was silent in the car, and you kept on looking over, and it's like, what is funny? It's like the idea that woman tried to kill your toupee with a broom is just funny to me. It's like, I don't want to relive this anymore, Chris. Just, I said, "Okay, do not share the story with your mother." I said, "Oh, come on. I got to share the story with my mother when I get home." It's like, "Come on, Chris, really, cut me a break here." I said, "Okay, fine." So, but, he tried his own show. Then he tried a show called Snavely, which is a Faulty Towers spoof.
Oh, by the way, though, did you wind up sharing that story with your mother, or?
Oh, I'm sure I did. I just didn't tell. I just said, "Mom, don't share it with anybody else, though."
Well, now we're sharing it with the World Wide Web. So for all of you watching,
14 years,
Malta.
Well, 14 years later, he can't do anything to me. At least I hope not. I have to say something about Betty White, because Betty was very dear to me. And when I was, if it's in the book, I don't know if it is, I had reconstructive jaw surgery when I was 16. And I got back to my hospital room and there was flowers and balloon and a signed picture from Betty. And I don't know how much Betty remembered that, but I called her manager, Jeff Whitesick. I hope I'm pronouncing his name. And I shared the story with him. I said, when you talk to Betty, this was about a year ago, please relay this story to her that I remember when I was in the hospital. And one of the first people that greeted me back to the Mama's Family stage after my jaw surgery was her. And I remember distinctly because she was one of the very few people. It was her and Ken Berry, and I think some other people. And I just remember, because Betty didn't have to, that's who Betty White was as a person. One of the most giving, loving human beings you'll ever meet in your life. Not just on who she was as an artist, just as a person. And I relayed every story I had had about Betty to her manager. And I said, oh, by the way, ask Betty if she has a copy of Snavely, this sitcom of my father and her. And she said, I don't know. Let me ask her. I said, so a week later, I emailed back. I said, well, what did Betty say? It's like, she'd love to have a copy of it. So she gave me the address. He gave me the address, and I emailed it to her with a letter, a little bit of small letter, and just say, you have no idea what you meant to me, Betty, in my life. And she wrote back and said, you have no idea how much I loved you and your father so much. I think about you, Chris. I hope you are well. I hope Trish is well. I hope Scott is well. And I said, all those great memories of Snavely being on the set. And I said, Chris, you have to remember, I knew your father back in the 50s. He directed me in a play. I said, yeah. And I told her the name of the play. I said, you were at the Fred Miller Theater in Wisconsin. She says, how did you know that? I said, because my mom and my dad met in Milwaukee at the Fred Miller Theater. My mom was a charm school teacher and ad model, but she was a model in this play that was done by Sherwood Schwartz or Seymour Burns, who's one of the head writers of Skelton. So that's how my dad and my mom met. But he had worked with Betty in the early 50s in a play at Fred Miller Theater. So he goes back, way back with Betty. So when I reminded Betty of that, she just was like overwhelming. So Jeff had emailed me back and said, oh, please send it a copy. I'd love to see it. And just, I said, I don't want to bother Betty because she was 97 or 98 at the time. And I said, I don't want to bother her because she's got so many demands put on her. But just tell Betty next time you talk to her that Chris loves her to death. God loves her so much, and how much my dad loved her. And my thoughts and feelings to her is just, and just that I tell her every time I talk to her, it's like, Chris Korman always says hi. And Betty always comes back and says, please tell Chris how much I love him. And that's my lasting memory of Betty White, is what a glorious, she's like Carol. She's like Mary Tyler Moore. Her brand transcends show business. It's who they are as human beings, what you remember about them, because they made who they were on TV so accessible. They gave you a part of who they were, but they preserved enough of their own soul for themselves to remain normal and sane. Because you have to keep you're an artist, you know this. You do have to keep a piece of yourself to yourself, just removed enough so you can stay sane in this business. And only the greats can offer that accessibility, that vulnerability, and still remain a relatively normal human being, and without getting crushed by this business. And this business can crush you.
Yeah, I think when you put yourself out there in the public, you have to have a very thick skin. And you mentioned this, yeah, and you mentioned this in the book too. I think you mentioned, you have to have a thick skin, or else you will be eaten alive by anybody, especially because we have a world now, the internet, anybody, people that don't know you, you don't know them, can say something to,
right.
Can be critical, and for no other reason than just them being critical. And you will, you can just like fall like dominoes if you don't
right.
have that self-protective mechanism to defend yourself there.
Absolutely.